Welcome folk to today's presentation on Strategy X, how to secure our future from existential threats and risks to humanity. It's with great pleasure that I'm able to present this at the One Young World Summit in Belfast, with the overall ambition of creating a youth council for existential threats. So this century's global challenges and global security challenges are significantly different from that of the last century. We've seen increasing risks from pandemics, the planetary emergency, as well as traditional security threats like wars and conflicts. Moreover, these tend to interact and reinforce each other, and there's much learning that's come out of the pandemic in terms of how we've failed to respond at a global level with multiple national responses instead. And actually, these challenges are increasingly global and need to be responded to in a global fashion. So you can see in this slide on the left-hand side, essentially last century's challenges were around human security and the Millennium Development Goals that formed the foundation for the Sustainable Development Goals in this century, along with the Climate Change Paris Agreement and the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. However, going forward into the future, we will increasingly need strategic foresight so that we're able to prevent and reduce risks to human existence. At the moment, there's ongoing discussions with the UN Future Summit, which is due next September in 2024, which has a range of different areas suggested by the UN Secretary General. However, at the moment, there's a gap in terms of how do we ensure our future existence as humans. So what are the key threats to human existence? So in this slide, I've just put together a summary of the main threats, and I've put them under the clusters of planet, people, peace, and prosperity. They could be put together in any number of different ways, but the main thing is that these align with the Sustainable Development Goals and are easier to remember the kind of key areas. The other kind of key area that we need to reflect on is the sense of the unknown risks of others as well. So when we look at our key existential threats and risks, and the consequences and timescales, you can see here that those from the planet, even though they are often seen as long-term risks, have actually been framed as those of the highest risk, because they represent the cascading tipping points that we are seeing already occurring today. And the consequences of runaway climate change and a hothouse Earth are really not compatible with human civilization going forward. Whilst theoretically we've seen a pandemic already that hasn't killed everyone, maybe one in a thousand people, but caused immense global disruption, future pandemics could have a much higher fatality rate. And the same with peace. Our ongoing threats for nuclear war continue to exist and have increased with the conflict in Europe. However, whether it's exponential nuclear war is the question as to whether it destroys all of humanity. And then in terms of prosperity, we're still at a threshold in the next few years as to how we manage that risk with the development of artificial general intelligence, which, as we've seen in the last months, there's increasing alarm about how this may impact upon human existence going forward. One of the key things with existential threats and risks is how they interact with each other. We saw that being played out, for example, with the pandemic, how if one country failed in its response, if it affected the lives and the way that the pandemic spread across the whole world. And then in terms of the planet, we're seeing tipping points that are being started to be exceeded. For example, the melting of the ice caps leads to change in our ocean currents, which affects our weather patterns, including drying of some areas and flooding in others. That actually leads to cascading change. In turn as well, this affects food security and water security and makes conflicts and wars much more likely. So one of the things going forward is actually we need to not see each of these areas in isolation, but actually how they interact and think about how we address these in a way that makes the whole world much more resilient. So I don't want to just talk about the problems and the challenges here, otherwise we'll all feel entirely doomed that there's no hope at all for the world. However, as change agents, we need to set a positive vision for our future. We're here to create a flourishing and a safe world for all, where we can secure the well-being of our future generations. We need to be ambitious in our goal. We need to not just talk about risk reduction. Who wants to just reduce the risk of the future of humanity? We actually want to prevent some of those risks, especially those that are liable to cascade, like pandemics and nuclear wars and climate tipping points. All of these, once they start to cascade, you can see multiple interactions and acceleration, as we talked about in the previous slide, and that may well happen with emerging tech. However, there may be other areas where we can only reduce risk and focus on recovery, including things like the planetary emergency and disasters. But we definitely need to up our game and have a much more ambitious goal in terms of what we can do to save humanity for the future. So a good start for this would be having a global plan to save humanity. I haven't found one yet, and I think we need to create one. We can build upon lots of solutions that already exist. We've got tons of knowledge, and our technological and innovative communities are full of solutions. These are just outlining some of them, but we also need to be strategic and identify the gaps. So the next slide, so I'm just outlining some of the key areas that I think that we need to focus on, but they're just suggestions and they're really out there for further comments and feedback. So for the planet, in terms of strategic solutions, we need to prevent tipping points from escalating and creating runaway climate change. We need to develop a strategic global emergency response for the planetary emergency and stabilise our essential determinants of life on this planet, including things like temperature, air, water, land and food systems, and in turn also advance a recovery plan so that we actually have a healthy planet to live on at community and global levels. For people, we need to draw upon learning from the pandemic so that we can prevent future pandemics. We can create a one planet health system that addresses the One Health challenges, but also interacting with the environment. And we've got plenty of opportunities to transform global health security by utilising digital solutions. In terms of peace, we know how to prevent violence, certainly at family and community level, and we can draw upon this evidence base and in turn create a culture of peace at community and national levels. Moreover, though, we should be identifying risks to conflict so that we proactively create and develop pathways to peace. to prevent wars and conflicts from happening. And the other key area is about having good weapons controls, for example, on nuclear release codes and so on, so that we don't accidentally end up in a war that we didn't intend to have. And in terms of prosperity, clearly we need to carry on with the ambitions around the Sustainable Development Goals, but increasingly these need to be built upon scaled renewable energy to ensure that it's truly sustainable. We have many opportunities going forward in terms of the digital technologies, but we need to deal with the risks and governance around artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence, and to promote global goods like health and education, research and innovation, so that we can actually speed up our approach to creating solutions. So this slide really just summarises the opportunities that exist with combining the emergence of the digital revolution. We've undergone a number in the last decades, but we're on the threshold of another one with artificial intelligence and quantum computing, but combining that with our need to create a massive green transition could be fundamentally a huge quantum leap for what we need to create wise, safe and green and healthy humans and a planet for the future. We can also apply digital technology that already exists today to create a global futures platform. Existential threats and risks for humanity can be enabled through digital technology. So, for example, governance can be enabled through greater coordination and communication. We can share knowledge and advocate much more effectively through a global digital futures platform, as well as build capacity for the workforce that we need for the future. So one of the other key recommendations going forward in the strategy is about strengthening governance. And we saw that in the pandemic, this was one of the real failings of our ability to create a global response, that our current international governance mechanism it needs to be renewed so that it's actually able to address the global security challenges of the planet, of people and of peace in a modern day world. So part of this as well, it needs some very practical tangible things. For example, this outlines with the red pillars a security council that is a high-level security council, could be informed by a youth council that is actually proactively using foresight information, risk analysis to ensure that all countries and a global response is developed for preparedness, early alerts and response, not just for pandemics, but for all of our existential threats, including the ones that we that are unknown. We need to be scoping out what are the risks. And these need to be based on strong foundations of prevention and recovery, the end pillars, as well as enabled by One Planet health systems, the digital transformation and renewed leadership for planet, people and peace. So there are key recommendations going forward. These are all draft, so I welcome comments as we go on this, but the recommendations so far about strengthening governance, which we've just heard, a global security council, developing a strategy, a plan for how we might save humanity, using a digital platform to enable that as a process, strengthening advocacy, for example, a global declaration for the well-being of future generations, and creating courageous leaders for the well-being of future generations, as well as engaging partners to enable the whole world to act together. Now, clearly, a youth council and engaging youth, they're already a recommendation, but I see these as a cross-cutting recommendation that could actually be really invigorate what's needed going forward. So in terms of the next steps, this is an ongoing process, and I'll be presenting this to other audiences and engaging others. I welcome feedback, and do contact me with your suggestions and further information. But for today, I really hope that you managed to get some success in developing the first steps of establishing a youth council, a global youth council for addressing existential threats, with a view to securing a healthy world for everyone, and for the well-being of our future generations. Thank you so much for your time today. Goodbye.